Hello, this is Elizabeth and Ailton Brewington, and we are with Discover Brightside,
Hello, 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 hello.
and we are so excited to have today our sponsor for the month, as well as a very treasured person. As many of you may know, that bees are getting extinct, but I think we've balanced them out, and they're good for the climate, and they're just good to have around. And she is a beekeeper and a candle maker and many other talents. But today is the book launch, and we're going to learn more about this honey making process, how she extracts the bee wax, and how you can make these candles in your home as well. And I also have in my studio Deborah, who's a jewelry maker, and she'll be coming up with a demonstration and some videos that you might enjoy. We'll make sure that the links are available to you in the subscribe. But first, who are we? We are Discover Brightside, where we discover new things and authors, books, people that make products and services, as well as music and film and video. So we discover new things each month. We host live recordings and then we share them to each and every one of you. Now, in order to keep this channel alive, we need you to subscribe. We need you to write a comment. We need you to share these videos, and we need your full participation. We also, for those of you who can afford to buy these products, candles and jewelry and Lisa's book, we want you to do that. Now, this Lisa's book will be with us for the Christmas and the holiday season as well. And so we want to make sure that you buy it. You write a review, you go on Lisa's pages, you like, subscribe, and you connect with her as well. So we'll make sure that all her links are available to you. But without further ado, I would love to introduce you to her. And more importantly, we talked about this last month. Did you know that Alberta, Canada, is the largest honey makers in Canada? So this was something none of us knew. And I think on the last episode, we had people from Montreal, we had people from Toronto, and none of us knew about this best kept secret. So I'm going to, without further ado, introduce you. And Lisa, please go ahead and introduce yourself. And thank you so much for coming on our show.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Lisa Graham, and I am the author of The Art of Beeswax, a guide to candle crafting. I'm very excited to have this book finally available. I have been running YYC Beeswax since 2015, and this book is coming out of a lot of my experiences. I'm a lifelong crafter. I used to work commercially with bees, and I started YYC Beeswax kind of on a whim. It was kind of an accident. I was looking for a new project to do and started a business. So over the last decade or so, I have experimented with the different things you can do with beeswax, one of which is candle making. And as I started my candle making journey, I very quickly realized there's not a lot of information on beeswax candles. If there is information, it's a small section of a candle making book, or it's a small section of a book on bath and body products and many other things you can do with beeswax. So I do many of those things with beeswax, but I really wanted to create a resource for people coming into this space, into this very interesting medium of working with beeswax to make candles. And all of my experiences distilled into this book over the past over a decade I've been doing this. So I tried to create this resource that really dives in deep on what beeswax is, how you can work with it from a candle making perspective, and how it's different from other waxes. One of the things I discovered that I didn't know through this journey is that beeswax is one of the only waxes, it is the only wax that can be used almost in its natural state. So using soy waxes, palm waxes, paraffins, they all go through a pretty extensive manufacturing process, whereas beeswax goes through filtration. So through the filtration process, of course, it's not as consistent. Where you're getting your beeswax from, it changes how the beeswax behaves. So it really is a unique medium, and you need to understand how it works and a little bit about the nuances about the beeswax itself in order to be a successful beeswax candle maker.
Wow. So how long has this love affair with the beeswax been? How many years has it been?
Oh, as I mentioned, it used to be a summer job, so I had the choice. I was very afraid of bees, and it was to the point where my mom was volunteering to help one of my younger brothers, his class, plan field trips. And one of the field trips was to the apiary. And I would not get out of the car. Fast forward a few years later, and I had to choose, do I want to go on the travel club trip to Greece in order to do that? That was about the only job opportunity I had to pay for my trip. So I decided I liked going to Greece more than I didn't like and was uncomfortable with bees. So I was very uncomfortable for those first couple years. I did go back, work with them for a few summers, and it was a great experience. I learned a lot about the bees. I learned to be a little bit more comfortable with them. And then I went off to university. I have 2 engineering degrees, an undergraduate in software engineering and a master's in biomedical engineering. And while I was working on my master's, I was looking for the next project, and I had volunteered at our local women's resource center. They were doing an advertising campaign to bring awareness to the shooting at École Polytechnique in Quebec. And in that case, it was supporting women in engineering. I was a student of engineering. I was a woman, and this just fit really perfectly. They were doing rolled candles, which we're going to demo tonight. And I really fell in love with it then. So a few years later, when I was getting restless, I had a bunch of candles I had made I was trying to sell, and found people were wanting the sheets to make their own crafts. So that's kind of how I got into this as a business. And of course, people started asking, do you keep bees? And I wasn't keeping bees. And I said, well, I guess I know how. So to answer the question, I guess I can get a hive. And then it's just kind of grown from there. So my product line has expanded. My bees, I don't have any at this moment. They all died over winter a couple of years ago, and it hasn't worked to start them up again. So hopefully we'll be back at it next year with the bees. And yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Wow, I'm so sorry about the bees. Oh, that sounds so sorry. But how accomplished are you, an engineer and putting all this together? And so it's gone through a product development phase as well. So I think let's go ahead and do the demonstration, since you look so beautiful and we're ready to go with that. And I think we've got a soap maker
Okay.
coming on as well. All right, so go ahead and show us the rolled wax demo.
All right. So I'll switch my camera over. Are you able to see this one
Yes,
okay? It looks a
and
little blurry. We'll
let's
try
try
to get
to.
it sharper.
No,
There, I
we
think that.
yeah, we can see the candle. Yes.
Excellent. So this is the candle I'm going to be demonstrating for you today. This is made with a rolled sheet of beeswax, and you can kind of see there's a texture to this, a hexagon texture.
Yes.
And in order to make something like this, we have our supplies ready to go. So it's very simple. This is one of the easier candles to make with beeswax. Having a hair dryer or a heat gun, this is a heat gun, is very helpful. A ruler to make sure everything is measured correctly, scissors, wick, and I use an X-Acto knife. It's Very, very simple. And then of course we have the beeswax sheet in the background and the cutting board. So the first step is to take off the bloom on the sheet. So if you look very closely, hopefully this shows up on the camera, there are some spots on here that are a little bit darker and some a little bit lighter. This is what's called bloom, and it's natural. That's how you know you have a quality beeswax candle, if your candle blooms like this. So when we're starting to work with the sheets, it makes it a lot easier to get rid of the bloom. It's easier to work with, and it also brings out the vibrancy of the color. So I'll start by putting the heat gun on, and you will see as it warms up the wax, you'll start to see that darker color coming in. And it takes a minute for the heat gun to warm up. Once the heat gun is warmed up, this goes very, very quickly. And when most of the bloom is gone, I'll flip the sheet over to the other side. There's usually a little bit left on the other side as well, and we'll take that off. This side always goes much more quickly. Okay, now that we have the candle ready to go, or the wax ready to go, it's nice and warm. It'll be very easy to work with. So the next step, we're making a taper candle, and with the taper candle, you can make 2 candles out of a sheet. So I'll start by measuring the edges, and I have been making these for a very long time, and I've figured out these sheets, they're about 8.5 by 16 inches. So in order to get the nicely tapered top that we have on this one, it needs to be cut at a slight angle. So my favorite angle is to cut them at 8.5 inches. So I'll start on one side of the sheet and go up 8.5 inches, marking that point, and then I'm going to measure from the opposite corner. So we'll bring the ruler to the opposite corner, measure our 8.5 inches, and make a mark at that point. Sometimes they're a little bit hard to see, so pulling the edges up can help, and you can see they are a little bit offset, and we'll basically connect those 2 markings and cut the sheet at that angle. When we pull them apart, I always like to check, especially if I'm making them as a matched pair, make sure they are about the same height, and it looks like these 2 are pretty close to the same. So the next step, I'm going to put one piece aside. I'll do that one later. And the next step is to measure out the wick. So I'm taking the longer edge of the wax, and I will measure the wick along the entire length, and I'm going to do a fancy loop at the end. So I'll measure how far I want the fancy loop to go, and we'll cut the wick at that point, and I'll cut a second wick for the second candle. And placing one of the wicks aside, I'll start with one of the wicks, and I will line it up against the flat edge of the sheet. So we have the flat edge over here, the other edge is angled, and I'll line the wick against the edge and start to pull the edges up off the cutting board. It's kind of sticky, and we'll start to fold the edges of the wax slightly over the wick. So we're covering the wick down at the end, and I'll do that all the way along the candle. And when we get to the top, I want the fancy loop, so I will loop it around and bring the edge in so that very edge is included into the wax, and we have a nice little loop at the top. From here, it gets easier. This is about the hardest part of making these candles. We'll start rolling. We want to keep the rolling as firm as we can. You don't want it too tight or they become a little bit too small for a regular taper holder. And you don't want it too loose either. They can fall apart. Most important thing is to check the bottom. Make sure the bottom is staying flat. If you start to go off at an angle, we'll try to get it going off course here. So it's starting to kind of go off course a little bit. It's very easy. You just unroll and start again. So it's a very forgiving craft, especially for young kids. Young kids love making these. And once we get to the end of the candle, I'll gently press the edge in. This makes sure the candle is going to stay closed. And if the bottom is not quite flat, I will press it gently into the cutting board, and that's it. We have a candle.
Wow, that is so simple. You don't have to make wax or anything. Oh my goodness. Yes. So you sell the sheets?
Yes, I do. Our sheets are somewhat seasonal. I haven't found a good way to ship the sheets out in the winter. If they freeze, they do get brittle, and we're in quite a cold climate, so I try to avoid shipping unless we have a Chinook, a lot of plus temperatures, and especially plus temperatures during the night. I might be able to sneak an order out. Usually from October, when it starts to freeze, through April, I will do local pickup only. The rest of the year, I can ship sheets. We have some candle kits available for, I think I have four or five different types of rolled candles. The other candle kits we have with solid wax, those ones we can ship year round. It's just the sheets that are a little finicky.
But how exciting and how simple. That was so awesome. Now, show us your book. Tell us a little bit about this book since we are launching the book. We'll come back to questions. Yeah,
sure.
Tell us about the book. Yes.
Yeah, so this is the book. Basically, what I've done in this book is collected information. I like to start out with a little bit of background with whatever I'm doing. I did write a thesis, so having that background information is kind of ingrained from working in academia. So we start out talking about the materials, talking about the beeswax. It is a very beautiful book. And a lot of the pictures in here are from my own hives and from the work that I have done with the bees and the wax. Then we get into materials. So we look at wick information. How do you create your double boiler? What materials do you need to make your candles? And then we get into the good stuff. So this is an example, the rolled beeswax candles. This is what I was just showing you. And I have beautiful, beautiful pictures in here.
Oh, wow. Yes, they're beautiful.
And this is an example, step by step, showing the process of creating the candles. So I have step-by-step tutorials all the way through different types of candles, rolled candles, hot wax candles, container candles. I also talk about dyes and scents. How do you add those? How do you work with them with beeswax? It's a little bit different working with beeswax because it has its own natural yellow color and it also has its own scent. So you have to be mindful when you're choosing colors to work with and scents. You can use white beeswax, for example, when you're working with dyes. And then I close the book with some testing information. So once you have your candles, how do you test them? Again, beeswax is a little bit finicky. It changes over time depending on the source of your beeswax. And even in our local region, I have had batches of waxes where I need to adjust things like the wick. So I have a section close to the end that's talking about testing. And there were a couple of questions I had as I was working through the book about, is this information true or not? I saw some conflicting information online. So I did some of the tests. So one example is the direction when you're working with a square braid wick. Does the direction of the V in the wick matter? So I decided to test it out. I did a couple of short studies on things like that to see how the candle burns, and I documented them. As far as I know, I haven't found anyone else who's done that. So I'm hoping that will be helpful for other beeswax candle makers out there.
So tell us what your website is.
Sure. The book has its own website, artofbeeswax.com. And it's also available on the business website, yycwax.com. The book is available at yycwax.com, and there's also materials. So if you have any DIY supply needs for candle making, beeswax candle making, I have all that available there. The Art of Beeswax website, artofbeeswax.com, also has some of our book resources. So there are some links at the end of the book. If you need supplies, we have a starter kit I'm putting together right now. We have a Facebook group that's over 8,500 people at this point. Very exciting to see so many people interested in beeswax candle making. I have a video course coming up and so much more. So a lot of that is linked in through the Art of Beeswax website.
Oh, wow. This is so precious and so exciting. Elton, you had a question?
About your beeswax, why beeswax? Do you find that to be more operative? And I mean, 1,001 questions. What about the fragrance? How do you include that into the recipe?
That is such a great question. And it's a question I asked myself when I started this book. I started working with beeswax because it was convenient. And the more I worked with it, I have been a lifetime candle burner. So I have burned other types of candles. And there's something about beeswax that just draws me in, maybe because I've worked with the bees so much. So as I was thinking about that question, I came down to kind of an emotional connection with the medium I'm working with. The flame, when the candle's burning, reminds me of summer days. It gets very cold here in the winter, so lighting a candle reminds me of the sunshiny days, working with the bees. The smell of the beeswax reminds me of working with the hives, and it is a very unique, I find it's a very soothing, earthy smell, so having that connection with Mother Nature. All of those aspects I boiled down to it's an emotional, it's just a kind of an instinctual emotional connection with the medium. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question? Okay, so what I'm going to do, so you're watching Discover Brightside. Make sure you subscribe, write us a comment, and we'll make sure you have all of Lisa's information available. So if you want to make a purchase, you can do that. And you can also, if you cannot make a purchase, you can go to her pages and like and join these groups and join some of her workshops. Thank you for watching, and we have really enjoyed this.
Yeah, one more before you close out. So how many, you must be pretty busy, I mean, to make it a productive effort. Let's just say and how many candles do you put in a box or case just as an understanding? And because everybody, you always need, especially if you're giving candles out as gifts and you put 12 in a box or a case and you want to put some special designations to them. I mean, I thought it would be good if as a company, we produce our own candles and we give those out at the end of the year for a holiday season, and with a special fragrance or aroma to them. I mean, I don't know. Just tell us about your process, if you will.
For sure. So a lot of the products, and I like how you mentioned, I forgot to mention, I am very happy to do a giveaway to the people who are here this evening. So one lucky person from tonight's call will get their choice of the book. I have paperbacks and ebooks, whatever's easier. And I will also send you the candle I made. I'll make both candles and you'll get a pair of candles as well. So I have that giveaway today. To answer your question, I have a lot of candles that are designs I make regularly. They tend to be our better sellers. So those I make available all the time. I also do a lot of custom work. So I have had companies want some custom designed packaging, things like our mason jar candles. I can put some custom stickers on. I've done wedding invitations, corporate as well. Our lip balms are extremely popular for custom labels, corporate, weddings. What else have I done? Bands. I play in a band. I make them for my band, and I have one of our bandmates plays in another band, so we've used them for advertising for our musical endeavors. Yeah, so there's kind of a mix. If people are looking for something that we make regularly, we can do large orders. We can customize to a certain extent with a lot of the products, or we can create something brand new. So we have done custom scents. For one company, they had their signature scent, and we were able to integrate that into a candle for them.
Mm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it does.
is.
Yeah,
It does.
Yeah.
wonderful.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? Okay, so I am going to stop recording.